Hi, I'd like to share some thoughts on keeping the shoulder blades and upper back mobilized, which can really be great for avoiding neck and shoulder and upper back tension in general, just kind of stopping to do little moments of movement with the shoulder blades. And while you do that, you can also be kind of analyzing how your shoulder blades are able to move in different planes and directions, and where you might have restrictions or where you may feel more mobile. The shoulder blade moves quite a bit. So I can protract and retract my shoulder blades so they can move forwards and a bit back. That is moving on the upper back, protracting forward, retracting back. When I'm retracting back, I can also squeeze the shoulder blades together on the back. When they're squeezing together, they're adducting. When they're sliding apart, they're abducting. So adducting, adducting, abducting, abducting. They also can elevate and depress. So if I shrug my shoulders up by my ears, they're kind of swallowing my neck and they're kind of coming off the back. And then when I let them release down the back, that is depression down the back, I could actively depress them down the back. Just in easy, normal movement, I don't want to be straining to actively press them down. I want to let them be fluid and easy and ride the back. For activating those muscles, keeping everything fluid and moving, I can do any of these kinds of actions as an exercise. I can shrug my shoulders up and down while my arms are overhead. I can shrug them up and down while my arms are down. I can pull them apart and squeeze them together from different angles. I can do different arm angles. I can pull those elbows back, but make it more about my shoulder blades squeezing together. There are also some frequent misunderstandings about the idea of keeping your shoulders down in certain kinds of movement too. And as a fitness instructor, I find that sometimes people take certain corrections a little too much to heart, and they don't realize that they might actually be kind of working against themselves, and any of us can do that just from a misconception about how our bodies work. And I know for a long time as a dancer, I didn't really understand how the shoulder worked, and nobody has stopped to explain it to me. So the scapula moves a lot on the back, and it needs to in order for the arm to have its full function. On this little skeleton, these shoulder blades are actually glued down. The scapula is the shoulder blade, so these don't move, but the shoulder blade comes around and it connects to the clavicle, the collarbone, which just has a tiny little connection right here at the sternum, the sternoclavicular joint, and the arm is hanging off of all of that, but these arm bones, they're not actually attached to your back or your ribs, so all of this is like free floating, and this tiny little bone-to-bone joint right here is actually where your whole arm is attached from bone to bone. And it seems like such a tiny little spot, and then we feel this whole shoulder area and the whole shoulder girdle. We feel how that is much broader and bigger, and this seems a little odd that this is such a tiny little spot. So a simple exercise you can do to gain greater awareness of how your shoulder blade and your arm moves is to stop and palpate some of these bony points to kind of notice what happens. So if I place my thumb at the tip of my shoulder blade and I notice where it is on my back, I can raise my arm to about shoulder height without really moving the shoulder blade much. And that's for most people. You can get to about shoulder height. And then as soon as you start to go higher with your arm, this tip of the shoulder blade, it goes way around and it comes way over here out to the side of my rib cage. So it has moved a great deal on the back. And that shoulder blade has rotated to get there in order to bring the arm up. The clavicle on the front side, it does have to move. The angle of it has to change. And if I place a thumb on the little end at the sternum and I place a finger at the opposite end, first I can just kind of trace and check out what is the natural angle of that collarbone for me. And it is a little bit different for each person, just where your resting point is. And then for most people, just the way the body is structured, when you lift your arm, you can get up to about shoulder height without the clavicle really moving much. But as soon as that arm starts to come higher, what you'll feel is that this end of the clavicle does have to come up. So the angle of that bone, it becomes more and more acute here. That is different than excess elevation. And there are times that I want my shoulder to be able to move higher on my back, but there's other times I just don't want that excess work and strain, and my shoulder is a little more secure and stable when the shoulder blade is seated more on the rib cage. So there's different reasons that we want our shoulder blades to be able to move, that we want to be able to hold them and stabilize them in position so that we're also not hurting ourselves. We really want all of our muscles and joints to have lots of capability of mobilization and stabilization. A great simple exercise that you can do seated, standing, anywhere. There's like shoulder circles, forward, up by the ears, squeezing together on the back, coming down and through. I can circle all the way around. I can do both directions. I could do circles in opposite directions. I can do like one arm. I can kind of play around with the angles. Can feel all that moving in the upper back. It's also great just for circulation, getting the blood flowing. I can do the protraction, retraction feeling from different relationships to gravity. I could be on my back, and as I reach higher, I can pull my shoulder blades way off my back, and then I can kind of squeeze them down and together and towards the floor. And I can feel that nice stretch. Sometimes people call this puppet arms when you're on your back. I could do the opposite of that, and I could be supporting some of my body weight while I am protracting and retracting. So as I let my chest and sternum get closer to the floor, I can squeeze my shoulder blades together, and then as I pull my rib cage away from the floor, I can slide my shoulder blades apart. And I can work on nice, smooth, controlled activation of that range. I try to avoid having my shoulders go up by my ears at the same time. So I'm trying to keep the neck fairly long and the spine fairly neutral while doing that gliding action. I could turn that into a much more challenging exercise for a more advanced client and do shoulder blade push-ups where I can be down on my forearms and do my push-up from that range of that scapular glide. That is a lot of fun and a great way to really feel the blood flowing up there too. If I really stop to think about just taking some moments here and there to just move around, it helps to break up a lot of kind of chronic patterns that we often have going in our bodies, especially for most of us anymore with our cell phones and our computers, and we're like constantly hunching over devices, and we end up getting very rounded in our upper backs and necks, and our head and neck is going at crazy crunchy angles, and we start developing a lot of tension up here, and then some of these upper back muscles, they also start getting kind of weaker and spread apart because we're constantly hunching. With the elevation and depression of the scapula, I could work some of those same muscles while trying to support my body weight by doing some lowering and lifting of my body weight, deliberately shrugging and pressing out of it. I could do that standing up with my hands on like a desk, my feet on the floor. I could have my hands on the edge of a chair, something like that, and then lowering and lifting my weight. So I can have body weight on my feet, and then I can lower some of my body weight, let my shoulder blades slide up by my ears, press out of that weight. I could work to keep my shoulders away from the ears while doing a little tricep dip, and then I'm working to stabilize the scapula on the back. We can find times to do little moments of movement throughout the day that help to keep our bodies going. I might be stuck in traffic somewhere, and I could move my shoulder blades around back and forth. I could move my head and neck a little bit too and just kind of feel those stretches. I could be standing in line somewhere, do some shoulder circles, get some stuff moving around, feel that blood flow. There are lots of ways that we can insert little moments of movement throughout the day to help us feel that we're really in our bodies and to keep the blood going, to keep the body awake and alive. And that is one of the ways that we learn to feel good in our bodies on a regular basis. I'm Kerry Kreiman, and I'm the owner of the Pilates Works studio here in Fort Worth, Texas. And I hope that some of this information might be helpful to you when thinking about how you're moving throughout the day, or places that you might be holding excess tension. Maybe at some point you'll be able to come and take a class with us here, and we'd love to meet you. And our little friend, Tiny Joe Pilates, would be happy to meet you too. So to look at this in a little more detail, this tiny little intersection of the clavicle or collarbone meeting the sternum, that's the sternoclavicular joint. It comes around, connects to the scapula, the shoulder blade. The humerus and the arm bones, they're seated in this socket. All of this is free floating on the back from this little joint. So it all has to be able to slide up and down easily in order for that arm to have fluid movement.